Thank you again, everybody, for being here. Once again, my name is Ashley Holben. I work with Mobility International USA on our National Clearinghouse on Disability and Exchange project. And this is our Joining Hands Virtual Symposium. This is the first time we've done a regional forum. And our intention is really just to make it very interactive and engaging. And we want to hear from you. We want to hear your stories and comments and resources. And, you know, one of the motives is that people with disabilities want to go on international exchange around the world. And they often have questions about accessibility in certain countries or certain regions. And of course, exchange professionals also have a lot of those same questions. So this regional forum, like I said, is an informal opportunity for attendees to kind of get some of those questions answered, or at least pointed in the right direction. And so probably in this room, we have some individuals with disabilities who have studied or volunteered or interned abroad in Asia and the Pacific. And we're going to invite them to answer questions about their international exchange experiences, including questions about access as it relates to their disability. And we also have in the audience a lot of people with disabilities who maybe someday they are aspiring to study or volunteer abroad in Asia and the Pacific. And then finally, we also have, you know, I hope some people on this call will see some people with disabilities who are local to Asia and the Pacific, who live in the region, who can share some of their lived experiences about their home countries and this region of the world, especially related to disability and access. So I want to start by, you know, please let us know in the chat box. I want to know where you're tuning in from. You can either let me know your country or maybe your country and your city. And then also, what time of day is it for you right now? Are you eating breakfast, lunch, dinner? Is it the middle of the night for you? So I'm here in Eugene, Oregon, and it's kind of the middle of the day. I see some folks joining from Egypt, wonderful, hi. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where it's the mid-afternoon. It's late in Egypt, probably almost bedtime. Folks in Washington, D.C. Hey, another Oregonian in Portland. Hi, welcome. Shannon's joining us from Chicago, Minnesota, Maryland, lots of East Coast folks. Someone's having a snack in Ohio, Baltimore, New York, Florida, and California, someone on my time zone. Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for responding, and it's great to see so many folks here. Oh, and Yusushi, hi. I just saw your name in the window as well. Yusushi, are you joining us from Japan right now?
Yes. Okay,
wonderful.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry for being late.
Oh, no, not at all. What time is it over there for you right now?
4:22.
In the afternoon?
Yeah, no, morning.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being a night owl in order to join this session. I really appreciate it. And then we also have someone joining us from Houston, enjoying some Thai food. I am jealous because it's lunch here and thinking about that. So the next question I want to ask folks is, and again, you can let us know in the chat window, why did you choose to join this regional forum discussion on Asia and the Pacific? And I want to know, is it because you either live there? Is it because you had an international exchange experience there? Is it because you want to travel there someday? Let me know in the window. Let's see, Jen is saying, I studied abroad in Japan during college and lived in Japan for 3 years after college. Wow, wonderful. Great. Let's see what some other folks have to say. Sarah at Kent State works with some partners in that area. Great. Rebecca Berman is just as curious about some experiences and resources, especially in Indonesia, China, Taiwan, and Korea. There's a study abroad provider from API who wants to know how to better support students abroad. Someone interested in Fulbright or study abroad, especially due to an interest in Indian culture. These are great responses. Thank you so much. Working with exchange participants in Southeast Asia and lived in Indonesia for 2 years. That's Lily. Very cool. Well, wonderful. And I want to invite a few of our kind of, I guess, guests. You're all our guests. But I want to especially invite Crystal, maybe we can start with you. What is your connection to Asia and the Pacific? Can you let us know?
Hello, everyone. My name is Crystal Allen, and I'm from Newark, New Jersey. My connection is for the first time I experienced an abroad visit was with Mobility International USA when I was 21, as I traveled to Tokyo, Japan, with 11 other advocates, people with other disabilities, for about 2 weeks. It was really, really a great time in 2005.
Wonderful, thank you. And we're so glad to have a MAISA alum join us on the call. Esha, if you're tuning in there from Colorado, can you let us know what your connection is?
Yeah, so I did a language experience in Jaipur, India, which is in the state of Rajasthan. I was a scholarship recipient for the Critical Language Scholarship through the Department of State back in, 2012, I think. Pretty sure it was 2012. Long time ago. And yeah, so I wanted to learn Hindi. My family is from India originally, but they're from the state of Gujarat. And I never learned Hindi as a kid. I learned Gujarati, so I was really interested in learning Hindi. So I took some Hindi in college at the University of Colorado at Boulder, and my Hindi professor encouraged me to apply for the CLS scholarship. So I did. Yeah.
Yes, and we're so glad you did, and we're going to hear more about that soon. And
Cool.
I also, let's see, I want to see if Vibhu, can you let us know what your connection is?
Hi everyone. I'm currently based in New York, working at the UN. My connection is that I was born and brought up in India, so I can help our colleague with her Hindi learning because that's my first language.
I love these connections.
Yes. So yes, I was born and brought up right in the capital city of the country, Delhi, which is where I did my schooling and then undergrad, and then I moved over to UK for my master's, and now I'm here in New York working at the United Nations.
Well, wonderful. Thanks for joining us. And Vibhu also joined us on a webinar earlier this year related to people with disabilities working in international careers, such as in the United Nations. So thanks again for joining us once again. And
my pleasure, Ashley. Thank you for having me again.
And Yasushi, can you jump back on for a moment and let us know what your connection is to the region?
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And that I'm born in Japan, and I grew up in Japan, and I finished bachelor's and master's in Japan, and then I studied in US for a year, from 2008 to 2009 for studying disability studies at the Syracuse University in US. Then I came back to Japan and achieved a doctorate, and that now I am working as a researcher at a Japanese university. But I have, aside from studying in US, I have visited some other countries in Europe and Asia and North America, such as Canada. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Syracuse Disability Studies, there's really nowhere else in the world where you can study disability studies like Syracuse, is my understanding. We've met some really fantastic faculty and students from there. Let me have Shannon Kelly join us and let us know what your connection is.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Shannon. I studied abroad in Australia in 2015. So I attended the University of Melbourne and I took 3 classes. And I was also able to study or travel around the country while I was there and also visit New Zealand. So I did get a really firsthand experience in Australia and get to live there and make local friends and explore a lot of different places in the country. So I'm excited to be chatting with you all about travel. It's pretty crazy in the world today, so it's always nice to reminisce those fun times.
Absolutely. I also wanted to give a shout out to Peter, who wrote in the chat that they manage the YSEAL Professional Fellows Program for ACYPL, which focuses on young political leaders in the region. And this is really great. Thanks for joining us. Really love to, we talk a lot about study abroad, but I also really want to showcase professional exchange programs too for early, mid, or late career adults, professionals, to enhance their professional development through international exchange. So international exchange doesn't end at the college level, which is wonderful. There's so many opportunities. Well, thanks everyone for just giving us a glimpse of your different travels and connections to the region of Asia and the Pacific. I'd like to know, one of my first questions for anyone who is willing to chime in is, while you were traveling, did you have an opportunity to meet local people with disabilities? And if so, how did you seek them out? How did you make those connections? And how did that enhance your experience? Would anyone like to start?
Start.
Sure, and who is this?
Oh, this is Aisha.
Oh, great. Go ahead, Aisha.
Yeah. So while I was in India studying Hindi, I decided that I wanted to volunteer at the School for the Blind in Jaipur. So I got connected with them because one of the teachers at the School for the Blind was helping me with Hindi Braille. So he connected me with the School for the Blind, and I actually got to meet local blind people in Jaipur, and we did an exchange of, they would help me out with my Hindi homework and I would help them out with their English and cane travel. So yeah, it was really amazing being able to meet other blind people who share the similar culture that I do, because that had never happened before I went to India on my own.
Wow. And so, were they surprised to meet someone who was visiting, a blind person who was visiting from the United States, who'd come all the way there?
Yeah, they were, I think one of them, just culturally, being blind in India is very different than it is being in the US. But they were curious as to why I was trying to use my cane everywhere rather than, going sighted guide or something like that. So that was a very interesting experience for me as well.
That is interesting. We've hosted a lot of exchange students, and sometimes learning to use cane is one of the new skills that they have an opportunity to try while they're in the United States. And some of them really take to it and kind of adopt it for even when they go back. And
oh yeah, absolutely.
Did Dragon go abroad with you?
Dragon, no. So Dragon is my seeing eye dog. I actually didn't get him until 2013, so the year later. And honestly, I probably wouldn't take him to India just because, at least where my family is, there's a lot of street animals that, may or may not have rabies, and it's just not a safe place for him to be. The stakes are a little too high for me to want to travel with him to India. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And let's see, any others? Crystal, can you tell us a little bit? You went on a kind of a unique, you had a bit of a unique experience in that your program was through MIUSA, so the program was kind of designed to focus on disability leadership. And so I imagine you probably had a lot of opportunities to meet local people with disabilities. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Kind of, how did that enhance your experience while you're in Japan?
Well,
and feel free to turn your video on for anybody who's speaking. It's optional though.
okay. Well,
lowered.
Sorry, my jaws was talking. Well, it enhanced my experience by first just meeting the 11 other people who were from different parts of the U.S., from Florida, and there was one person from Oregon, as well as one other person who was blind. You know, I'm legally blind, and she was totally blind. She was from Hawaii, and just in my immediate group of for the experience, it was really enlightening to see the dynamics and diversity and
Mm,
disability. Um, and there were two other uh, delegate ambassadors who traveled with my group that had different dimensions of hearing loss. And I was not privy to knowing about the different branches of hearing loss, from being auditory deaf, hard of hearing, and having cochlear implants. So it kind of like enhanced my knowledge on the diversity in the disability community.
mm,
And then once we had the opportunity to go into Tokyo itself, because for the first week we were in Tokyo Bay at a wild bird park. So we had the opportunity to draft a blueprint for that bird park to make it totally accessible for Japanese residents with any kind of disability.
okay.
And that second week, we did a lot of traveling to different places that could connect with us as, you know, individuals with disabilities. So we went to this technology, assistive technology company. It was a little small inside, but the CEO, he was blind himself and a Japanese native. And his company specialized in screen reader software, kind of like what JAWS is to a lot of visually impaired and blind users.
Right.
It's really insightful to be able to connect with him, and even have some of the translators, and even using some of the Japanese language, because that was my first time traveling to Japan, and my first time actually using some Japanese. I retained some of the language during my short period there, but I really can say that it enhanced um, my insight on different cultural customs and my advocacy, because post that experience, I now have started my own nonprofit organization
Wow.
to advocate and bring awareness to blindness, which is called Eyes Like Mine Inc. And I also work for the Department of Human Services for the New Jersey Commission for the Blind and Visually Impaired as their community outreach specialist.
Wow.
So I'm like, the experience to go to Tokyo, and with me still being fairly young and adjusting to my vision loss, really kind of like provoked me to become more active in what disability rights means, and just seeing beyond any barriers, you know.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you so much for elaborating a little bit about what your exchange experience was like. That was your first exchange experience, and kind of how the different ripples and the long-term impact it's had on you and your career. I'd like to hear also from Shannon. Can you tell us a little bit about, I'm curious, you know, some people travel, they might be the only person with a disability in their group of travelers. Was that the case for you? And if so, did you also meet other people with disabilities when you went abroad?
So I was thinking about this earlier today because of the list of questions you sent out, and I was pretty much the only person with a disability in my program. I mean, I saw people, you know, in the city on the street, but there was no one with a disability that I really interacted with. If I were to go back and do it again, I definitely probably would have sought out to make more relationships with people with disabilities, just because it can be sort of isolating to be in a new country by yourself and advocating for yourself, and not really having anyone to turn to that understands the different barriers you're facing. There was one girl, her name is Allie, that the Disability Services Department connected me with because she studied abroad at the University of Melbourne a couple years before me. So I was able to talk to her, and she was able to give me some tips on how to navigate accessibility and just kind of share her experiences. And I was able to, you know, connect with her, but it was very different than having someone on the ground to actually talk with and relate to that way. I will say that I feel like a lot of the people that I met and became friends with, I was their first experience with having a friend in a wheelchair. So I do think in that way, even though I didn't have much of a disability community, I was able to kind of expand horizons for other people and kind of help them become more open-minded. Because I lived in a dorm and a lot of the students there were first years. So they came from suburbs or, you know, further out from the city. So they never really had experience with interacting with a disabled person. So I think that in that way, it was good that I was there, even though I was the only one to kind of help expand some mindset.
Yeah. Oh, I appreciate that comment because, you know, and Esha brought this up too. You know, being a person with a disability, especially maybe a visible disability, can have a, you know, unique impact not only on other disabled people in that local community, but also on non-disabled people too. So thanks for bringing, for sharing that. And I want to ask a question to Yasushi. And feel free to turn your video on if you wish, or you don't have to. But what would be, what are some ways that travelers with disabilities can meet local people with disabilities in Japan or in the Asia Pacific region? Like, were you involved in any disability-related organizations or have any resources that you would recommend?
All right, Ashley, to clarify, are you asking me about the resources in Japan, right?
Yeah, in Japan, or if you're also involved in any kind of more regional networks or organizations, you're welcome to comment on those too.
See, actually, I'm so sorry to tell you that I only know about Japan because I haven't visited so many countries outside of Asian country outside of Japan. So I mainly talk about my country. Actually, because I'm a scholar, I, I the most of I have a most opportunities for meeting with people with disabilities is an academic association called Japan Society for Disability Studies. There are a lot of people with disabilities, so I learn when I make a presentation there, for instance. The people with many different kinds of disabilities ask me questions and comments, and they also talk about their own experiences to me. So I learn from them, and I learn each other with them, and that way I make a lot of connection with people with disabilities in this country. Yeah, that's what I say.
Thank you. And that resource again was Japan Society for Disability Studies.
Yeah, that's not service organization. That's an academic association, but it's my opportunity to meeting with people with disabilities so far. Yeah.
And, you know, here in the United States, usually every July, we have this big conference on independent living. And I know that in recent years, there have been really large delegations of people coming from Japan to these independent living conferences. So, you know, I'm wondering, are you familiar at all with the independent living movement in Japan? And is that, you know, would you recommend that as a resource to travelers with disabilities to seek out?
I see. Actually, I am as an autistic person, I am not familiar with the independent living movement, unfortunately, because in Japan, at least, independent living movement is mainly about for people with physical disabilities. So I have never mentioned independent living movement to the people with autism spectrum or ADHD or specific learning disorder or so, but yeah, I would encourage the people with disabilities to make us international connection differently. I will, because different country has a different culture and different system for people with disabilities. So we can learn from overseas, and hopefully we people with disabilities in Japan can offer something to the area abroad. So so I really recommend any kinds of opportunities for people with disabilities in Japan. Yeah, but the problem is that many of them don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
So and that's a challenge. So perhaps we would need some kind of language specialist who can be liaison between
Mm-hmm.
people with disabilities out of Japan and outside Japan and inside of that country.
Thank you so much, Yasushi. You just gave us a lot of really helpful information, letting us know, you know, what are some different types of disabilities that are represented in different types of movements, resources. You addressed some non-apparent disabilities, people on the autism spectrum, people with learning disabilities, and other non-apparent disabilities. They might have different resources than those who have maybe physical or sensory disabilities. So anyway, very interesting, and thanks for sharing that. Anybody else who is any of our attendees, you're welcome to share your experiences in the chat, or you can raise your hand or let us know if you'd like to take the floor and we can pass you the mic. I also noticed a few more comments. I saw Vanna, who's done public health work in Thailand, was born there and continue living and working there. Vanna, is this the same Vanna who used to work at World Learning that I met in Washington, D.C.? Yes. Oh, fantastic. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. Would you like to take the floor at all? And you're welcome to turn on your mic and video if you like. But if you don't want me to put you on the spot, I'm happy to move on. Great. Go ahead.
Okay, can everybody hear me now?
Yeah, you sound good.
All right. Okay, so last year for about 3 months, I returned to Thailand after 3 decades of being in the United States, because I was born there in a refugee camp. So I've been here in the US since 1987. So last year I completed grad school with my master's in Southeast Asian Studies with the focus on, yeah, thank you. With the focus on Thailand and Cambodia, also with the focus on the Thai language, because I've been also studying Thai language along with my language, which is Khmer, Cambodian. So I went to do some public health work in northern Thailand, putting together, developing a non-medical program for the elderly and disabled who are underserved in the rural mountains of northern Thailand, and working specifically with the ethnic minority hill tribes of the area to programs that would enable them to live out the rest of their lives as comfortably as possible through evaluating data, research, and collecting data, both original and derivative. So I went and visited constituents and gathered in data from government and non-government sources and so forth. So I was with an NGO called Warm Heart Worldwide, which does a myriad of things from environmental stuff to social services for elderly and disabled ethnic minority tribes in the hills of mountain provinces, particularly of Chiang Mai in Thailand. So that's what I was doing for the last 3 months in last year, from end of August till November of last year. And after last year was when COVID-19 hit, so.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you had the opportunity to go there before, and because it sounds like a really enriching experience. And what was one lesson that you learned related to accessibility or disability while you were there? I mean, you were there for 3 months, but what did you take away from that?
Well, it varies. If I'm in the city, like say in the capital of Krone, Bangkok, it's accessible. But if I'm in the country, in the rural area, it's hit and miss.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, you know, like in the USA, I'm not know how to do things myself and get around independently, but in the city, in the capital of Krone, so if I want to take the SkyTrain this somewhere, I mean, they have a system implemented in place where, like, if you go to catch the SkyTrain, they have a security card to come take you, they bring you to the train and everything else. Whereas if I'm in DC and I want to take the subway or whatever, I can familiarize myself with the platform where things are, and then or I might get myself independently. But
right.
Whereas in Thailand, you cannot take to bring you. And at first, I was a bit uncomfortable, like in the US, I do things most of the time by myself, but in Thailand, I kind of have to follow them. So, but me, I'll just observe and just follow along and do whatever. But and initially, I was like a bit comfortable, like,
I'm sure there are some people here who can definitely relate to that style of travel. You know, it's different from what you're used to in the United States. I wanted to ask Vibhu a question if you're available. You know, just living in so many different places, what are some resources that you would recommend to travelers with disabilities going to living in India, doing international exchange in India, I mean, or other parts of the region? Do you have any particular recommendations or advice related to accessibility or how folks can prepare?
Sure. So it generally depends on the kind of disability you have. As our friend was saying earlier, I apologize, I didn't catch her name, but then being a person with disability in India, even if you're from abroad, is culturally very different from being a person in the Western world. And now I can relate to my experience in the UK and the US as well. So depending on the kind of disability you have, there are various organizations. So for example, there is the Association of the Blind that caters to people with visual impairment, and there is a separate organization for people with physical disability, and there is an organization called the LEA Virjang Institute for people with hearing impairments. The challenge is that most of these organizations cater to one single region. So depending, because India is such a large country, right? So depending on the part of the country you are visiting, you need to identify an organization which caters in that region on the basis of the disability you have. And the other problem that people from the Western world can especially struggle with in India is because is that we have so many languages in the country. I believe we are the only country on the earth to have at least 15 national languages. For most people, and especially for people with disabilities, English is often not the first language. Okay. So unless you have an interpreter or somebody who can translate whatever that you are saying in English to them in their language and whatever they are saying to you in your language, it could be challenging. But generally for travel purposes, I personally would recommend that it's better if you are traveling with your own assistant. Or if you are traveling under a formal arrangement, like an exchange program or studying at an Indian institute, then you would be safer already informing the institute or the organization in advance that you have a disability and that you have certain requirements so that they can let you know how they can respond to it or whether or not they can respond to it at all.
Okay. Bibu, Yasushi brought up non-apparent disabilities, people with non-apparent disabilities traveling, and I'm wondering what, are you familiar with some of the types of supports or maybe just kind of cultural approaches towards non-apparent disabilities such as autism spectrum or learning disabilities, ADHD? In India?
Yeah, I think, I mean, they are obviously hard because they are not visible disabilities, right? So people, when they look at you, they don't automatically get that you have a disability. And a sad thing about non-apparent disabilities or disabilities such as learning disorders in India is that they are still largely stigmatized, and rather than understanding that it's autism spectrum. So one person might be different. They are often stigmatized as being mental disorders. So then that part of it becomes difficult to deal with and to navigate, because then you really need to convince people that, hello, well, no, it's not actually mental retardation as they call it in India, or a mental disorder, but it's a learning disorder. And then again, there are organizations, again, that work categorically for people on the autism spectrum or other non-apparent disabilities who could be contacted, and they may be able to provide some resources or information.
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate you sharing that. And you know, one of the really amazing things about getting to work at an organization like Mayusa is getting to meet grassroots leaders and disability rights activists from around the world who are, you know, trying to change some of those types of things and trying to remove some of the stigma, trying to normalize disability, different types of disability as, you know, part of community, how to integrate people with disabilities to have access to, you know, every aspect of community life. And so I think, you know, what I'm hearing from you is, and from other folks on this call is, you know, where can you find some of those leaders with disabilities and connect with some of the organizations that are maybe led by people with disabilities and mobilized by disabled people themselves. So would love to see more. I think for anyone on this call, I think that would be one of my pieces of advice is try to find those folks if you can. And we'd definitely be happy to help out Mayusa, try to connect you with any alumni as we're able. We have only a few minutes, and I wanted to, if I may, put Serena on the spot. You know, Serena, you have traveled extensively throughout Asia, and you also conducted some Peace Corps volunteer service, and I was wondering if you could, also in Central Asia, I believe. And so I was wondering if you could just comment a little bit about accessibility or kind of disability culture, or anything else that you've kind of observed from your experiences.
Yeah. Wow. I could totally unpack that. I do have to make my comments a little short.
I know. I really put you in a tight spot there.
Okay. No problem. So the interesting thing is that I did the majority of my traveling before I got really good blindness skills and good self-advocacy skills. So I was really passing for sighted in a lot of my traveling and learning a lot about myself for sure in the process. My term of service in the Peace Corps in 2014 to 2015 was the first time that I traveled / lived abroad with good skills. I not only traveled with a cane, I had extensive training in how to use it properly. I had better confidence and good self-advocacy skills. I had Braille literacy in my toolbox for the first time, learning a foreign language. So I was able to just access the Braille codes for both Russian and Kyrgyz. And I literally like taught myself on the plane from Istanbul to Bishkek, like on my way there. So the difference it made having good blindness or fill in your disability skills and the confidence and self-advocacy was just a world of difference.
Okay, yeah. I would imagine that would probably be true of a lot of people, and those are skills that are going to be with you not just for your travels but for your life. And you know, you probably, I'm curious if any local people that you met with disabilities, if they observed you using these skills and were curious about them, or if they introduced you to any new skills that you hadn't used before.
The Peace Corps experience again was exceptional in the context of my greater travel experience because I was there for a year and a half, and I was working very closely with the local organization that was building a training center. So I got to actually meet all kinds of blind folks in Kyrgyzstan, in contrast to a lot of my other traveling experiences where, like I said, I was passing for sighted and was not connecting with the local disability community. I will say that I did take particular notice. I spent a fair amount of time in Cambodia, and I did notice that massage therapy, as in many places, is a very common vocation for blind folks. And I was trying to work in a trip to one of these places so that I could kind of connect with locals, and my travel plans didn't allow me to do so. But hindsight being 2020, no pun intended, I definitely will be looking for those kinds of connections in my future travels for sure.
Well, thank you again for letting me put you on the spot there and trying to condense your experiences into a very short period.
Yeah, thank you so much for putting on this forum. It's been really fabulous.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. And for anyone else on the call, we are going to have to wrap up now. So any last final comments in the chat window, you're welcome to put them in now. Monica, my colleague Monica, has been posting a lot of links related to the people's stories or interviews, some of the people who are on this meeting today. So you can check those out. And then one last thing is I want to invite anybody who is willing to turn their video on at this time, and we'd like to take a group picture before we sign off for the day. So this is your chance if you'd like to turn your video on. We have Esha and Shannon and Daniel and Elizabeth and Yasushi, Ivana, Erica, Nina. Wonderful. All right. Let's see, Monica, would you mind doing the honors?
Mile. Mile, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, let's be in touch, and don't forget to tune in next week when we resume our Joining Hands Virtual Symposium. We're going to be talking about things like virtual exchange programs. You might especially be interested in our discussion on diversity and identity and intersectionality when it comes to international exchange, and a number of other topics. So we hope you'll join in and ask your wonderful questions and leave your wonderful comments. And thank you again so much for taking the time to be here.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. This was great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
very much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Sushi.